This is the Cutshall Boys and the Florida Grass Widow. Would you look at that house? Pitiful sight, ain't it? Paint a-peeling and the tin on the roof curled back at one corner, and the yard rode up something terrible. Just pull off the road here for a minute if you don't care. Hey, law, I don't know how many years it's been since I come this way. I had heard something of what happened to the Cutshall Boys, but I never thought to see their place all overtook like this. Look at that window wide open, the old curtain just blowing out. Is that a beer carton there on the porch? Well, I ain't a bit surprised. They say it was the drink that was at the bottom of the trouble. The drink and the grass widow from Florida. A grass widder? Why, honey, that's a woman what acts like she's a widder, though her husband is living and above the grass yet. Some's divorced. There's an awful lot of them around. And some has just up and walked away from a marriage without no divorce. Didn't no one know which way it was with the Florida woman. Now, the way I heard it was the Florida grass widder had her a job with the health department. She was a nurse of some kind, and she had rented a little house down the road a piece from here. My friend Viola knew her and said she was a friendly somebody from the start, set in to going to church and to dinner at the volunteer fire department, and getting to know her neighbors all up and down the branch. She was no spring chicken, but still a good-looking woman, up in her 40s, big bosoms, red hair. She wore it in a topknot on top of her head. I saw her once when I was in the dollar store with Viola, and it was Viola told me the whole story. Now, the Cutshall boys, they was two old bachelors, Walton and Dalton. They was twins, had lived right there in that house all the 50-some years of their lives, farming, taking care of their old daddy till he died, and hadn't neither one of 'em ever had a thing to do with women. Just weren't interested, some said, but there was others said it was because wouldn't neither of 'em try to court a woman if his brother didn't give the go-ahead, and it was reckoned such hadn't never happened. But some way or another, that Florida grass widder got to be friends with the Cutshall boys. Viola said it all started when the Florida grass widow was out walking her little poodle dog one evening. She passed by on her way up the road and threw up her hand friendly-like at the Cutshall boys who was sitting there on the porch. "Howdy," hollers Dalton, or it could have been Walton, and before you could say Jack Robinson, here comes the grass widder, hopping up on the porch with the little poodle dog hopping right behind her. Well, Walton, or it could have been Dalton, gets up from his chair and tells her to sit down, and he pulls up a milk crate for himself. The Cutshall boys don't hardly know what to say, being as they ain't never had no strange woman on their porch, much less one from away. But it don't matter. The grass widder sets in to talking like one thing, asking all kinds of questions, and then she asked do they like to play music. Well, boy, that was all it took. The boys set into telling her about how they had once played a set with Bill Monroe when he was visiting Nashville, and how he had asked them to join up with his band, but they couldn't on account of having to take care of their old daddy. Then Dalton, or maybe Walton, goes into the house and comes out with a fiddle and a banjo, and the Cutshall boys begin to pick and sing, and afore long the grass widow joins in. Viola said you could hear the music clear up to her house. She said they was singing Farther Along We'll Know All About It, and that the grass widder sang just as sweet, taking the high part against the Cutshall boys' deeper pitch, the three voices twining together in close harmony like they'd been doing this all their lives. Now, according to Viola, things went along like this for some little while, the grass widder stopping by now and again of an evening to sit on the porch and sing with the Cutshall boys. Didn't no one think a thing about it, but after a time, things begun to change somehow. First, the boys cut back on the drinking they'd been doing and went to fixing up the place. It had run down something terrible in the 30-odd years since their mama had died. They bought curtains for the front room, painted the window frames, and they picked up the beer cans and such out of the creek where they'd throwed 'em. Then they went into Penland's and got them some new duds. Viola said she seen them in there buying new shirts and overalls. She said they'd even been to the barber, which was a new one for them, being as how they had always cut one another's hair. But here was Walton with his hair slicked down and parted on the left, and Dalton just the same, but the part running down the right side, or it could have been the other way round. Viola said they made right good-looking men cleaned up like that. And the first thing you knew, Viola said, it was clear to anyone with an eye to see that the Cutshall boys was sparking that black grass widow. You'd see her at the Burger Doodle with Walton, or maybe Dalton. Have I mentioned that them two boys was the very spit of one another? Viola says their mama was the onlyest one on earth who could tell one from another, and sometimes she weren't completely sure. Their daddy, he didn't even try, just called out, "You boy," when he needed something. Howsomever, time went on, and it was a strange sight to see the Cutshall boys' old truck riding all over the county with Dalton or Walton, ever which it was, driving the grass widow and her poodle dog around, and the other boy back home, sitting lonely on that porch, drinking beer again and throwing the cans out into the yard. Viola said the grass widow told her one day she was right taken with Walton, or maybe it was Dalton, the one who played the fiddle, the grass widow said. Viola said that to her mind it didn't clear things up none, for as long as she'd known the Cutshall boys, they'd both played fiddle and banjo, could switch instruments in the middle of a tune without missing a beat, and if you had your eyes closed, you'd never know a thing had happened. But Viola didn't tell the grass widow this, so maybe she should have. Things went on like this for the longest time, and sometimes the brother who was out with the truck didn't come back till way late at night, or even the next morning. It would have broke their mama's heart, said Viola, that and the drinking that was going on, and then that big fight and what came of it. And then she prissed her mouth up like a hen's bottom and said she washed her hands of the Cutshall boys, and such a story weren't fitting to pass on, and her husband Henry hadn't ought to tell it either, him a deacon in the Free Will Baptist Church. But I got Henry aside in the cereal aisle at the grocery store one day while Viola was picking out a cake mix 2 aisles over, and I had the rest of the story from him. You see, he'd been there at the house when the fight happened. Seems he'd gone over to ask the Cutshall boys for help putting up his hay the next week, and maybe to have a little sup of their beer, if I know Henry, deacon or not, for Viola will not allow it in the house. They was the three of them sitting there talking of this and that, when here comes the grass widow running down the road, still in her nurse outfit, big bosoms bouncing, red top knot, all ski-jawed and falling down, and the little white poodle dog just panting to keep up. "I'm a free woman," she hollers. "I got a letter to say my mean old husband, who'd misused me so, has died, and I inherit everything. There's a house at the beach and enough money for happy ever after." She pounds up the porch steps and stands there in front of the Cutshall boys, looking from one to the other. They both of them have their hair slicked straight back today, and there ain't no way she can tell which is which. "Dalton," she says, kind of puzzled-like, or she might have said Walton. Henry said he disremembered. And the Cutshall boys look at one another, and then at her, and both of them stand up. And one of them and says, "I'm Dalton," or Walton. The grass widow don't even blink. "Well," says she, "one of you said he wanted to marry me if ever I was a free woman. Said it time and again, oh, if you was just free, and I'm here to tell you I am now. Give me one of those beers and you two figure it out while I catch my breath." And she sits down and crosses her legs and takes a big old sup of that beer. Henry said the Cutshall boys was standing there just glowering at each other like two big bulls, muttering things like "I was first," or "It was me, she..." Right there in the cereal aisle, Henry was showing me how they was standing all puffed up and scowling, but when he started repeating the things they was saying, he broke off right quick. He said he was forgetting himself and him a deacon in the Free Will Baptist Church. But I let him know I'd not be content till I heard the rest of the story, and he give it to me all in a big hurry and his eyes swiveling around every which way to see was Viola coming. They went from talking, Henry said, to shoving one another, and from shoving to throwing fists, and all the while the grass widow just sat there, watching, a beer in one hand, the little poodle dog on her lap, and before long they was out in the yard wrestling like the fellows on TV, rolling about and hollering and raising dust like you never saw. Then one of them cracks his head against a rock and goes to bleeding like a stuck pig. "Oh, brother," he hollers, "you've killed me." And the fight stops, and the Cutshall boys is crying and hugging and bleeding all over one another and saying sorry, and that this is what happens when they let a woman come between them, and that they'll never be parted, not for any woman. The grass widow pushes the poodle dog off her lap and comes down into the yard. "Let me look at that cut," she says, and she squats down and pulls a bandana out of her pocket and wipes away the dust and the blood. "Am I going to die?" asks the one, looking up pitiful at her. And "Have I killed him?" asks the other, kneeling there with his brother's head in his arms. She don't answer, just tightens her lips and shakes her head. Then she sets back on her heels and looks from one to the other. "Go on, sit up. There, you on the ground. It's just a little cut, won't even need stitches. I'll have to shave around it some, then a butterfly bandage will fix it fine." But before I do that, I want to know something. It was both of you all along, wasn't it? Taking me riding, buying me lunch at the Burger-Doodle, feeding me all that sweet talk, taking turns. The Cutshall boys hang their heads. So which is which, she says. Finally, one of them speaks up. Truth to tell, ma'am, we don't rightly know. Mama thought she did, but before she died, she called us in and said that from time to time we was born, she had lost track. We was just too blamed alike. The other one puts his arm around his brother. We always took turns with the names. Depending of how we felt of a morning, it'd be my turn to be Dalton. Or Walton, the other chimes in. It just didn't seem ever to matter nohow. Again, the grass widow don't even blink. I'll take you both, she says. And that's what she done, said Henry, pulling him down a box of grape nuts. She married one of them at the magistrate's office, and then all three of them took off for Florida in her new convertible, her driving, and Dalton, or it could have been Walton, beside her, and the other one in the black with the little poodle dog. We heard wheels squeaking and looked up to see Viola and her buggy coming toward us. Henry waved the grape nuts at her and whispered real quick. We got a letter from the Cutshall boys about a year later. Said they was happy as pigs in slop and didn't look to be coming back. They sent a check to pay for having someone to look after their folks' graves, and there was a picture of the three of them. They was all three in short pants and bright-colored shirts and sunglasses. The grass widow had put on some white, and her hair was cut short and curly. There was three little poodle dogs instead of just the one. And the Cutshall boys, why, honey, they looked just like Florida people. The end.